God has kind of broken my life down into 22-year chunks. The first 22 years, I think he was preparing me for what I was going to do the next 22 years. And I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, and I from the time I can remember, thought I was going to be a nurse and be a missionary nurse, because my church that I grew up in was very missions minded, in a very carry the gospel kind of a way. You know, you had to go and preach the gospel to everybody you could possibly think of. And I was going to go and be a missionary nurse because I heard such great missionary nurse stories, medical missions, you know, in Africa and China and South America. And I was just going to go somewhere. I thought probably China or Africa. I had it all figured out. And then instead, God took me to Philadelphia City Hospital. It was called Philadelphia General back then. It was a 2,000 plus bed hospital for the indigent, for people who had no insurance, because we didn't have insurance for everybody back then, and for people who were just too poor to be able to access any health care at all. They had the city hospital. And it was huge. It was a big hospital, and I was 13 years old, and I went and worked on the women's surgical floor. And the very first day, there were 60 beds on the ward and 30 down each side of the room. And the first day I was there, I just found out that they had one nurse for 2 wards. And they had a couple of nurses' aides, and then there was me. And I remember coming home and telling my mother the very first day I was there, that's where God's calling me to be, in urban missions, because every country that I'd ever heard of had somebody from that country. You know, you've been to 39 countries. Place of Promise has had people from about 57, 58 different countries come to Place of Promise. As little as we are, God finds a way of bringing people from all over the world, and from about 3/4 of the states of the Union. And I think you were mentioning Rwanda. 2 of the countries in Africa have actually downloaded the audio version of the mentor training that's been on our website, and they asked for permission to create CDs, and have used it to 20 different ministries have used it to train their missionaries to go out and use that training to help them. So in a kind of a weird secondhand way, I finally made it to Africa. But what I saw in that city hospital was people who were so broken and so lost and so alone, suffering from the same kind of tragedies that all of us suffer in our lives, except that they were doing it alone. And they were not aware of who God was, and they weren't aware that there was a God that loved them. And God really kind of gave me his ability to see not their brokenness, not their hurt, not their suffering so much as the potential in them. And what I really believed was that Jesus didn't just command us to spread the gospel. We're good at that. And with all the technology that we have today, we can spread the gospel everywhere. And we have translated the Bible into all kinds of different languages. My son worked with Wycliffe for a while, and that's all fantastic, and it amazes me. But I think what Jesus really asked us to do was build disciples. And I think one of the things that the church needs to kind of rev up on and get ready to do is, how do we build disciples? Not just how do we spread the gospel, but how do we build disciples? And how do we build disciples out of the people that we think we are there to take care of? In almost every church, there's a division between the people who do the ministry, people who take care of everybody, and the people who are cared for. Anybody disagree with me about that? You know, we have the people that we reach out to, and the people that we take care of, the people we donate our used clothes to, the people that we invite to the food bank, the people that we do these things for. But then, do we really know and believe that those people have the capacity and the purpose of becoming a disciple of Jesus also? Nobody is so broken and so hurt that they can't become a true follower, a true disciple of Jesus, and then help somebody else to become a follower of Jesus. I tell people when they come to Place of Promise, you didn't come here because you're a mess. We all agree that you are, but that's not why God brought you here. God brings people to Place of Promise because he chooses them to come because he has a purpose for their lives. And God sees past all the brokenness. God sees past all the sinfulness. He sees past the addiction and the bondage that people are living in, and he sees the one he died for. And that person can become a true follower of Jesus if they get to know who he is. And so for the first 22 years, God was preparing me. I did end up going to the University of Delaware, got a degree in nursing, because my father insisted that that's what I had to do. And now that I look back at it, I was grateful that he did that. It was at a time when nobody really was getting a degree in nursing. There was only 5 schools in the country that offered it. And because it was brand new. And I just wanted to be a nurse. So I wanted to hurry up and go to some hospital, get a diploma and get done with it and become the nurse. And my father was like, no, God called you to do this. You got to do this way. So being who I was, I submitted to my father and went to the University of Delaware. And from there, ended up getting married when I graduated. I graduated from school, ended up taking my board exams on Thursday and Friday, and got married on Saturday, and moved up to Boston. So it's kind of like, I always do things that way. I was 22 years old. I had just turned 22. So those the first 22 years was getting it ready.